Amara Daniels never wanted to be seen, at least, not in the way they saw her. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trouble. She loved quiet mornings, the smell of old books, and the sound of pages turning. At just 12, she already understood what it meant to feel out of place, like a comma in a room full of exclamation marks. Westbridge Middle School was supposed to be a place where learning was celebrated, but for her, it felt like a war zone in slow motion. Every hallway held echoes of laughter that never included her. Every classroom seat came with side eyes and whispers. And in that sterile, overly lit classroom on the second floor, room 214, her name wasn't Amara anymore. It was Charcoal. The first time they said it, she thought she'd misheard. She was walking past a group of students, her math book hugged tightly to her chest, when one of the boys snorted under his breath, "Here comes Charcoal." The others laughed, high-pitched and rehearsed. Her feet stopped, but she didn't look at them. She kept walking, even as her ears burned and her eyes stung. The second time, it was louder. The third time, they said it in front of the teacher, and no one corrected them. By then, the name stuck like chewing gum to the bottom of a desk. It didn't matter that Amara had straight A's, or that she always raised her hand, or that she had won first prize in the district spelling bee. None of that erased what they saw when they looked at her. Her deep, rich skin. Her natural curls. Her silence. They mocked her hair. "Do you plug it into a socket to get that volume?" They mimicked her voice. "You sound like you swallowed a dictionary." They laughed at her lunch. "What's that smell? Did someone microwave a mud pie?" But the day that marked her forever wasn't one filled with cruelty alone. It was the day she stood up. She was late that morning. Her alarm didn't go off, and her grandma had already left for her doctor's appointment. She arrived at school breathless, clutching her backpack, praying no one would notice. But the moment she opened the door to room 214, the class burst into hushed giggles. One of the boys, Brent, who always found joy in cruelty, leaned to his friend and whispered just loud enough, "Charcoal's late again." Must have burned through her alarm. That broke something. Amara didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She walked slowly, turned to face them, and said in a voice that trembled only slightly, "Thanks. I burn hotter than all of you." It wasn't scripted. It wasn't a line she'd rehearsed. It came from someplace deep, someplace her grandma called ancestral fire. A silence swept across the room. Some kids looked away. Others looked stunned. And a few stared at her with something like respect in their eyes. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and voices that won't be silenced, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to American Folktales. Let's keep telling stories that matter. But Amara didn't feel strong. Not really. That night, she cried into her pillow, clinging to her grandma's old poetry journal. Miss Dottie was a poet in her own right. She'd grown up in the Deep South, marched in protests, and written words that once got her expelled for radical thinking. To Amara, she was safety. When Amara told her about what happened in class, Dottie simply smiled and said, "Baby, people are scared of what they don't understand. But don't you dare shrink to make them comfortable. You're not a spark, you're a wildfire." Her grandma's words became her lifeline. Every insult turned into a sentence. Every joke became a stanza. Amara began writing poetry in secret, pages and pages of emotions poured into her notebook. Her words weren't pretty. They were angry. Raw. Full of rage and sadness and hope. She wrote, "You call me charcoal. I carry heat in my chest. I build nations in my silence. I will not burn out." And slowly, something in her began to change. The taunts didn't stop. If anything, they grew worse. Someone drew a stick figure on her locker with "burnt toast" written underneath. Another time, they slipped a paper in her desk that said, "Go back to the jungle." But where once she cried in the bathroom stall, now she stayed still. She no longer let their words enter her bloodstream. She had built armor, made from syllables, verses, and the whispered poems of her grandmother. The school announced a writing contest. The prompt was, "Voices of the Future." Amara hesitated. She didn't want attention. She didn't want more fire. But Miss Dottie convinced her. "Let them hear you, sugar. Not the way they want to, but the way you are. So she submitted Burn Brighter, a poem that began with pain and ended with power. She poured every slur, every sting, every tear into that piece. She didn't soften the words. She didn't write for their comfort. She wrote for the girl she saw in the mirror, the girl with wild hair and wild dreams and a wild soul too big for Westbridge. When her name was announced as the winner at the school assembly, the auditorium fell silent. Some kids gasped. Some sneered. But most clapped. And for the first time in her life, Amara didn't lower her gaze. She walked up the stage in a simple dress and worn-out sneakers, held the microphone, and read her poem in front of 500 students. Her voice shook at first, but with every line, it grew louder. By the time she finished, the room was standing. Not because she begged for their acceptance, but because they finally saw her. Her poem was shared on the district's social media page, then featured in a local youth arts magazine. A radio station called her for an interview. And Westbridge, once a place that suffocated her, slowly shifted.